Здравствуйте, друзья!
Hello
В этот
friends.
раз я поделюсь с
This
вами
time I will share with you the
технологией,
technology that will be useful for arrangement of the cheapest, but at the same time insulated, and most importantly waterproof floor. This is what this floor looks like in a section. First we put a 3 mm thick polyethylene foam pad on the screed. This gasket compensates for minor irregularities in the screed. Cover the gasket with polyethylene foil. Lay a layer of extruded polystyrene foam on the polyethylene foil. Fix the edges of the foil on its upper surface with tape. And finally we complete this sandwich with a layer of the cheapest laminate. The second bonus of this technology is the absence of baseboards. Instead of skirting boards, I suggest using a sealed expansion joint. After all, we're talking about a real water-resistant field, not a parody of it. To dispel your skepticism about this technology, I'll tell you right away that before implementing this idea, I made careful tests. In particular, I applied a pressure of 20 tons per square meter to extruded polystyrene foam for 24 hours and registered no change. I tested the laminate together with the extruded polystyrene foam at a pressure of 133 kilograms per 15 square centimeters for another 24 hours and found no deviation of the indicator arrow. Now, let's get to the details. This technology does not require perfect leveling of the surface on which the floor will be laid. However, it is advisable that the deviation should not exceed 1 to 2 mm per meter. So, to level the screed, I made a screed rule like this out of a metal ruler and a piece of metal profile. And for mixing the screed, I used a fixture that's over 30 years old. It puts less strain on a high-speed drill compared to a factory-made mixer attachment, which can put such a drill out of action. The measurements showed that it was not necessary to level the entire floor, and it would be enough to fill only some places, which I marked with a felt tip pen based on the measurements. Since the screed layer was very thin, and it was summer, I had to moisten the screed for a few days and cover it with plastic sheeting to keep the screed from cracking. But the thin layer of screed is only a couple of weeks dry. As you can see, there are no right angles on my balconies, and the surfaces are not straight. In addition, due to not using skirting boards, I needed to ensure neat gaps between the edges of the laminate flooring and the walls. So first I tried using a paper template for markup. But my first experience showed that cutting a fairly accurate template out of paper isn't as easy as I thought either. Either accurate measurements had to be taken or the approximation method had to be used, which involved trimming the paper bit by bit with scissors several times. I ended up hastily making 2 angle rulers out of locksmith rulers, just screwing them together. This has made the marking of both extruded polystyrene foam and laminate much faster. When I needed to mark the contours of curved surfaces on the material, I used a tool similar to a divider with a wheel. I assembled it from a pair of matching iron strips and a small ball bearing. The tool turned out to be imperfect because when copying it was necessary to watch the parallelism of its movement all the time. But for the sake of this project alone, I didn't make up anything more complicated. When cutting extruded polystyrene foam with an electric jigsaw, a lot of chips are formed, and cutting this material with a knife is inconvenient. I made a saw out of sheet fiberglass using a sample of the factory saw. This saw heats up quickly when rubbing against plastic and produces a clean cut with minimal debris. To ensure the laminate is water resistant at the joints, I impregnated the joint locks with varnish. And to speed up this time-consuming process, I used a disposable syringe and a brush with short, stiff bristles. In addition to saving time, this technique reduces solvent evaporation from the can. In order to varnish the locks on all sides, Each block had to be fixed 4 times. It took me 5 to 6 minutes of hard work per laminate block. So you can multiply that time by 2 and calculate the labor cost. It may make more sense to buy water-resistant laminate right away. But in this case you will have to test it. First we measure the thickness of the laminate at the very edge and then place a wet rag over the edge of the block. In the morning we measure the thickness again. In this case, the edge of the block has swollen by 0.32 of a millimeter. Of course, before you can varnish all the locks on the blocks, you should first do a test assembly of the varnished lock. I should warn you that the locks will swell a bit under the effect of the varnish, making it difficult to reassemble later. Each laminate block has to be hammered in with a mallet. When the assembly is close to the wall, you also have to use a special fixture. But, in this case, the connection of blocks is extremely tight. And here's the whole process in 1 minute. I started by fitting the extruded polystyrene foam blocks to the floor, marking them and removing them immediately. Then laid 3 mm thick polyethylene foam on the concrete. On top of it I spread polyethylene film 100 microns thick. Then laid out the extruded polystyrene foam sheets and taped the edges of the polyethylene film to them. And finally laid the laminate flooring blocks. Since I live in the south, I chose a styrofoam thickness of only 30 mm. The declared density of the extruded polystyrene foam was 35 kg per cubic meter. However, it actually turned out to be only 28 kg per cubic meter. Of course, after the conducted tests, you could safely choose a density 1.5 to 2 times lower, which would reduce not only the cost but also the heat loss. To save money on factory paint trays, I learned how to make disposable trays out of plastic bottles. When the tray gets dirty, I cut a new tray out of the bottle and screw it to the old base. Instead of syringe cylinders, wooden bars of suitable thickness can be used. It is more convenient to pour varnish into the tray from a bottle, so I pour it from can to bottle with this disposable watering can. I coated the laminate with 2 coats of nitrocellulose lacquer. The presence of a second coat of varnish on a glossy surface is well controlled in reflected light. I didn't have a way to get the source in the right position, so I used a pocket flashlight. Nitro lacquer is highly durable and water resistant. In addition, it dries very quickly, making it easy to make minor repairs in the event of damage to the coating. I also varnished the saw-cut areas of the laminate, along with the section of the wall that was supposed to be in contact with the expansion joint. Usually the expansion joint is filled with cork sealant, but it is very expensive and requires a special gun. But I found a budget solution here, too. My expansion joint consists of a foam rubber gasket and a layer of silicone sealant. The foam rubber gasket limits the thickness of the sealant layer, which gives the sealant the required elasticity. One of my balconies is used for drying laundry, so the flooring was tested immediately upon completion and it fully met my expectations. The other balcony allowed me to expand the workshop a bit, and more importantly, to provide it with a microclimate in both summer and winter. Subscribe to the channel only if you like the video. See you on the channel.